I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, Awakening Waves. My name is Kathy Robert, and I'd like to talk, as I said before, about healing. Um, from the start, I would say my life it was about moving, it was about a little bit of chaos. My parents were young parents, immature, emotionally immature. They both had their conditioning from when they grew up and their parents' conditioning, and so on and so forth. And along the way, between the temper tantrums, the expectations being too tall for such a little girl, um, parenting my parents sometimes in odd ways that children can do, moving, adjusting to new homes, new rooms, new people, making new friends, and then having to lose your friends because you're moving again. And then your parents getting divorced because your mother had enough. No more moving, no more cheating, no more lying. And it's painting a very bad picture of my dad, but I think my dad was just trying to survive the way that he knew how to survive. And that's not to say it was a really great way to survive. Uh, the issue here is that over all this time, through my childhood, through my teens, through my young adults, and then even when I was in a very committed relationship, I was married and I had children, we still had all these little traumas that we dealt with. And, they were significant. I mean, my first miscarriage was at 20 weeks. The baby died in utero. That was our son. And somehow, we had ups and downs. We had some moves ourselves, job challenges, our children having their own issues, and my children being 9.5 years apart. Each one was like their own, like a only child, even though they had siblings, and dealing with that too, because by the time my middle child was 5 years old, my eldest child is a teenager, and then by the time my third child came along, she's practically a full-fledged adult. And then the middle child is a teenager, almost a teenager. And we just had all these things going on. And then our fathers passed away 2 years to the day, almost, one day apart, 2 years, and minus one day, they died from each other's death. And then we were moving, and we had 9/11 itself was a big thing. That was hard for me to handle, but you got little kids, you go on and you move along in that area. But dealing with teenagers and their issues, and then having a baby, and then your mother gets diagnosed with Parkinson's, and you're helping her adjust to that. And then your husband gets diagnosed with myelodysplasia or myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS, which is like a precursor to leukemia. So he has to have a stem cell transplant, which involves gobs amounts of chemotherapy to kill the blood, the bone marrow, and then getting a stem cell transplant and dealing with that for a year. All the while you have a granddaughter that's going to be born, And then you have your middle child who's going through some very difficult identity, you know, issues, enough that they spent several 2-week sojourns in uh, pediatric psych wards, and had to stay back a year in high school. And then the little one, my youngest, oh, he was such a joy. I mean, all my children are. They're beautiful people, but as when they're young like that, you just eat up all that energy and that joy that they experience, and you wish that you could have even half of that. Um, but then, things happen. I mean, we finally bought a house, and then our first granddaughter passed away in 2016, and that was the beginning of me sort of kind of unraveling. My nervous system was pretty packed. Like everything, I thought I was feeling things. You cry a little bit here, you cry a little bit there. But with Elizabeth, that was very difficult, because I didn't feel like I was being recognized. I helped raise that little girl, and it felt like because I was the grandmother, I didn't warrant the same amount of attention, if you will. And it sounds selfish, but I loved that little girl like she was my own. Like I carried her and I grew her and I pushed her out of me. Even though I didn't, I was along for the ride with my daughter. I supported her 100%. And then that beautiful soul came out, and I just fell instantly in love. And I mean, kids have their things, especially when they grow older. And my daughter and Elizabeth and her baby sister, they went up to the North Shore to live with the baby sister's father. And on March 27th, 2016, my daughter went to the ER because she was having serious vertigo, along with very debilitating headaches. And so she was in the ER, and her sister, or not her sister, her daughter and her baby went with the father, and they went to a family home. And somehow Elizabeth got out of the house and managed to find her way through the woods in the back to a pond. And then she drowned. And the aftermath of that was so surreal. But I was so busy trying to stand and to be there for my husband, which I really think he got the short end of the stick on that one, because I was so busy putting my attention on my daughter, then my granddaughter, who was still my baby granddaughter, my middle child, who's still in the midst of needing his own therapy for his issues. And then Ben, who was so close to Elizabeth. They were like two peas in a pod. And he was so devastated, but you wouldn't know it because he just kept moving around. But slowly, he started becoming less like that Energizer Bunny battery energy and more withdrawn. From the moment that we told him the next day after Elizabeth died, he couldn't sleep in his room. He was so afraid he was going to wake up alone. And his grief for Elizabeth, his best friend died. And, that was tough for a little boy. He was only 8 years old. It reminds me of that movie, I think it was My Girl, where her best friend died. I forget the girl's name, and I apologize if you're seeing this, the actor's name. I don't remember her name, but Macaulay Culkin played her best friend, and he died because he got stung by bees and he was allergic. And I think of that, and it's still hard to talk about without crying. I mean, I've reached new ways to approach the loss of her beautiful light here on earth, but she has gone out of her way to show that her existence is not gone. It's just a different form. And, during that time, we had to deal with the support that my daughter needed because she was dealing with custody issues. That relationship almost immediately imploded, and that meant that she had to come live here an hour and a half away from her baby because along the way, because she was in such a deep depression, she had to give up custody of the baby to the father, and he wasn't doing so great himself. But along the way, he managed to get it where there was a restraining order and we couldn't see her. And it took 3 months to get visitation, and even then, that was supervised. And the lack of support from the powers that be was amazing. So all that emotion, I'm trying to be strong for my family, my husband, my mother, my brothers, whoever, my friends. And yet no one could really reach me to support me. I think to some degree, while I was looking for support, I wasn't accepting support either. And that is kind of, I think, the start of the unraveling of my marriage. I loved my husband dearly, but I wasn't feeling seen, and I won't be surprised if he ever says that he didn't feel seen either. We were losing each other. Although, we could still laugh, we could still hold hands, we could still have serious conversations, but something was unraveling. And so time goes on. We, through divine intervention, we were able to get a lawyer who was able to secure I'm trying to think of the legal term for it, sole physical custody of our granddaughter to our daughter, and they lived here in my house. And that was great. That was the beginning, what I thought was healing from Elizabeth's death, because that October 26th was Elizabeth's birthday, and we were granted, I should say my daughter was granted physical custody of our granddaughter, and we brought her home here on October 26th, Elizabeth's birthday. So that was just amazing. And shortly after that, I made the thought, instead of mourning her on her birthday and her death anniversary, why don't we celebrate her and do something with her in mind? And so that first October holiday or Halloween, there was a walk in the zoo that was like a Halloween parade, if you will. All the kids dressed up in their costumes, even parents. And you went around and you were at the zoo and you visited the zoo animals, and there was pumpkin painting and face painting and all those wonderful things. And our granddaughter at that time was a little over almost 3 years old, almost 2 years old, I think. And she was in this beautiful witch costume that I bought her on the internet. It was kind of cute, not really scary witchy, just that beautiful, cute orange, black, and white. And then in the following March of 2019, we went down to Connecticut and we went to a tea house and had a tea party. Alice on the Common, I think is what it's called, or something like that. There's a Mystic Seaport. There is a Mystic Commons, I think. I could be wrong, and someone can correct me if they know the answer, the correct term. And we got so many uh, things that showed that Elizabeth was with us. Her initials, her name, her 26 or 27. 327 is something that comes around all the time. And, we did that kind of thing. And then 2020 happened, and we were going to go to the Boston Aquarium, but they had just shut their doors. And so what we did is we rented a van and we just drove all over Massachusetts, central Massachusetts into central Connecticut. And you weren't necessarily wearing masks, but they didn't have like restaurants open, or if they did, it was, I don't remember going to a restaurant, but we drove all over the place. We spent a day in the van with Elizabeth's ashes and her little urn that has a picture of her on it, with her sister, and with Elizabeth's mother and aunt and uncle, or uncles, and my husband and myself. And then so we tried to do that. And then 2021 came along, and my husband got diagnosed with a different form of cancer. And in June, early June, he had surgery. And on Father's Day that June is when my daughter's biological father came back into my life, her life, but mostly mine. I was talking to him on the phone, lived long distance, and something happened. Because I think, I kind of freaked out that my husband was going to die, and maybe in somewhere here in this Swiss cheese brain of mine, there was a click and said, "Oh, here's your future." And it sounds very cold and calculated, but it wasn't like that. I wasn't even thinking. And that's the big thing, is that I wasn't thinking. I was excited to reconnect because I had been living so isolated with just my family, and I didn't realize that I had lost friends and that I didn't have a circle outside of my family. And it wasn't like it was unusual, because I don't think it's unusual. I think some people are very lucky that they have a large circle of family and friends, but I don't. My family's spread out. I don't have a lot of nieces and nephews, and we only get together on the 2 or 3 holidays a year, and even then, since COVID, we haven't really. Maybe for Thanksgiving. But it's been not here at this house, which is I was usually the hub for everything. And by the end of that summer, I realized I had feelings for this other man, and I told my husband, and that basically shut down our marriage. We did try therapy, and that didn't work. And the reason why I'm telling you is that because as you go around the calendar, he sort of rebelled, if you will, by dating. I was talking to this man who was so far away and sort of having this emotional romance with him, when he decided that he needed that too. So he went and he found somebody, and he started dating her, and they had a relationship. And he moved out in the spring of 2022. And my financial state started deteriorating because I haven't worked since 2006. I had an odd job here or there for a day or two, but nothing ever really clicked or stayed. And then, the flags were there, those red flags, but I was ignoring them because this was so important to me. I felt like I needed to build a future for myself to feel safe. All the while, I never felt safe because he would do things like ghost. When he would get upset with me, he would ghost me. No communication whatsoever. And it's not like I could go and drive to his house because he lived far away. So, we went down there, myself, my daughter, and my granddaughter, and that ended terribly. It did not go well. And he cut off communication again. I went home without talking to him. And by the week later, I was really upset at that point. And then I found out he died. And it's like a nuclear bomb went off, and every part of my nervous system just went into overload and shorted out, and I was unable to function. Now, I don't think everybody has that, but I think there are a lot of people like me who are having a very difficult time healing. It's hard to feel like you're supported if you don't have people in your life. And I didn't have friends. I didn't have family. And not that, my kids could only do so much. When you're watching your parents suffer, you don't know what to do. You're a child, whether you're 30 something like my daughter was, and she's 37 now, and this is 3.5 years ago, a little over 3.5 years ago that this happened. And she was in a brand new relationship, and she was ready to fly the coop, and she did. Then I was left with my freshman year son and my older child, my middle child, who felt the brunt of that, the weight of that. Although he didn't really express it very much, he felt it. And at this point, my baby is no longer a baby. He's in high school and he's suffering. He's having a really difficult time with COVID. That did not help him with his studies. And he was more likely to stay home from school than to go to school and then get behind in his schoolwork. And I was able to recognize that he was having trouble. And I said, yeah, I'm going to take him out of school. We're going to do school online. And his father and his father's partner were not thrilled with that idea. And I don't blame them, because I can barely keep my own get myself out of bed, never mind supervise a teenager trying to do schoolwork. So we were able to get him to move in with his father, and he went to the high school there, and he's actually graduating with honors in a couple of weeks. So that was a very good move. And I'm very grateful to his father and his father's partner for allowing him to move in with them like that too. Because not everybody would, In the meantime, though, I tried several times to get a job. And it was short-circuiting what had already started to repair. And it just set me back even further. And on top of that, I'm getting guilt, telling other people, telling me I need to get a job. I need to get a job, get off my lazy ass and get a job. And that was just kind of re-traumatizing me all over again. The guilt, the shame. Here I am, almost 60 years old, and I'm unable to take care of myself. Barely. I rely on my children to give me room and board, and my husband to give me child support. And if he wasn't paying the mortgage, I wouldn't have a roof over my head. So all of this is to say that it's only, when you have a nervous system that is conditioned for loss, for betrayal, for lack, overwhelm, disappointment, emotional abandonment, your world becomes pretty small. And your survival is very there's like a paradox, really, because you can feel, and I'm going to read this because I have my notes, that I do have things to be grateful for. I do. I have, even though we're not, we've been separated, we're not legally divorced yet, but I'm grateful for him for continuing those mortgage payments. And while he resents every single moment of it, he's still doing it, and I'm very grateful for that. But I still feel very unsafe. My nervous system feels very unsafe. I love my family, every single one of them, my brothers, my sister-in-laws, my children, my grandchild, my pets, everything, all these beautiful souls. I'm so grateful for them, and I love them, but I still have a body and a mind that anticipates what could go wrong. I worry, I can see beauty in so much and be grateful for that. I mean, God Almighty, the way things can produce, how we can become human, it's amazing what a little tiny pinprick of, not even a pinprick, you can't even see it with your naked eye, cells become humans, become animals, become plants, the world, right? Yeah, my mind scans for everything that could go wrong. And then I'm spiritually aware of the vastness of all we are. The fact that we are a soul within a body that can make our reality this abundance, this beautiful life. We're nothing but joy and happiness. I mean, you get challenges, sure, but you're able to handle them. You have that capacity. I no longer have that capacity. My world, my emotional world, sometimes can suddenly shrink to such a small world that I can barely survive that moment. And so I'm sorry, I'm like looking at my notes. I just want to make sure I stay on topic. I live in a survival state that's short-circuited, that distorted my relationship with life itself. Yeah, again, excuse me. I'm not scripted, so I want to make sure I stay on topic. And I'm going to read this verbatim, so please excuse that as well. But I started realizing that because my world became very small emotionally, even with the good things around me and being grateful, my unconscious focus on all that was surviving, worrying, bracing, anticipating, and recovering. I stopped being connected to the possibilities of life, to the hope of all that could go right. And I slowly was realizing, as I started to kind of get out of that functional freeze at the bottom of the well, I was now on the ladder, and the light at the top of the well was me. I could see that I had these places where I could rest, and I believe that, what has helped me is learning about daily gratitude practice. If you can find the gratefulness, if you can find your thankfulness in what you do have. I have a roof over my head. I have my wonderful pillows. I'm in love with my pillows. They're so soft and they're so gentle with my face. And, I can be in love with my sheets because they're so soft, and, and over the winter they kept me warm. And I can be happy that something made me laugh, something made me smile. And there's most days I do smile, excuse me, or I do laugh, but when you're in the midst of this stuff, it's hard to remember that there's still good stuff around you, even though you feel not so great, you know? I practice affirmations. I'm learning how to meditate. Um, and one of the things I feel like I need to do is to remind myself every day that there are infinite possibilities for abundance of all sorts of, financial abundance, emotional abundance of love and care and hope, right? Um, there's just so much ability of positive and good in life for myself, for you, for all of our lives, for the world, even amidst with all this crazy stuff that's going on, you know. I have days and sometimes weeks where I can see and be excited about possibility. This YouTube channel is very exciting for me. I'm allowed to put myself out there and to show you that I'm still in it. And it's not like these other channels. And, these people who are on YouTube who have so much wisdom to show are great because they can show you that wisdom. They can show you that joy and that love. But they're already in this place that feels far away from you while you still are in this healing. And I don't think healing ever stops because there's always going to be something that you can see from a different perspective if you're growing. So, I'm finding too that when something comes along and it kind of pushes me back, it makes me sit down hard and it exhausts me. And, that nervous system kind of goes up into warning, 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 and I feel exhausted by that. By the, you can't even sleep. I don't sleep well because of that. Um, I've always had very, very vivid dreams, and my dreams have been off the charts vivid. I've been using ChatGPT to record my videos, my dreams, and interpreting them, and getting a kind of an idea of where my mind is, where my consciousness is, and that in itself has really helped me in this step-by-step healing I'm on. Um, what I also need to say is that I've started recovering from those days, and sometimes it can be a week, but I'm recovering quicker. It used to be, it was months that I would be stuck. And, now I can get out of that stuckness and I can actually feel proud of myself for doing something, and it usually has to do with my house. Although the other day I have a creditor that is like pissed off at me, and I finally got the nerve to call them and to kind of put that fire out, which is a relief. I don't do well with phone calls anymore. I used to be able to be the person who could call and make things happen, or take care of misunderstandings and whatnot. And what's really great though is that this makes me proud that I can see just how much healing I've done. And if you could take that time too, look and see wherever you happen. Now, this is 3.5+ years for me. It could be longer, it could be shorter. But whatever days or weeks, months, years you have behind you, there's going to be progress. You just have to look for it sometimes. It's quiet. It's not going to be flashing in front of your face like a neon sign. I'm healed, I'm healed. No, 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 no. It doesn't work like that. It's a spiral, And that's just what I wrote here. I said, I think a lot of us don't realize how bland, how unremarkable survival can look like. It can be procrastination, exhaustion, avoidance, overthinking, doom scrolling. I do that all the time. It's feeling frozen while the mind stays very busy. And the thing is, though, the healing spiral, and imagine you're going like this, and it's going up, but it is not like this steep ascent. Very few people have spiritual awakenings like that. It's a minority, although I think it might actually become more common as the world starts to awaken to exactly what we are and how we function. It's a woo-woo, and I won't go down that that rabbit hole just now. I used to think that I wasn't healing well, especially when I was in talk therapy. I always felt like I was just a duck in the middle of a pond, a one-legged duck, swimming in tiny, tight circles, never getting to the shore, seeing the shore, but never being able to get there. And some days it kind of feels like that, but then I can remind myself now that there has been progress. If you can get out of bed and you can take a shower or just get dressed or even make your bed or do a few dishes or anything like that, if you go to work every day, that's progress. So don't just dust it off your shoulders. It's progress, and you should be proud of yourself. I know I'm becoming proud of myself, and I'm loving myself for that. I have times where I'm like, oh, God, Kathy, I swear to God, you never would have done this, 10 years ago. You would have gotten up, you would have gone, and you would have done, and you would have done, and you would have done. But I never knew exactly what damage I was doing to my soul, to my nervous system, because I didn't allow myself to truly feel the emotions and then let them go. Like I said before, I was just packing it down, making it hard as cement, The purpose of spirals, though, is so that you can get to see all these wounds that you've had from a different perspective, because you're looking at it from just a different perspective. Imagine a mountain. Imagine an ant climbing a mountain. It feels like it's that long of a trek sometimes, but it's not really. There's a lot of space between where you were and where you are now. As we heal, we also evolve. What you knew 10 years ago, a year ago, even 6 months ago, yesterday, you know more than you did. You know the consequences of your actions. You know that, in my case, I know that looking at myself and saying you're a terrible person for hurting your husband like that. You're a terrible person for not working and all this other stuff. I mean, I could go into it, but I don't think that's going to accomplish anything other than to maybe bring me down. And I don't want to do that anymore. I find that I love myself enough that I don't want to pack that bag and carry it around anymore. And I think that anybody who's watching this, and if you're still watching this at 39 minutes, then you know if you know. Who wants to pack a bag and then carry it around forever, weighing you down? You don't have to do that. And I also believe that along with that higher perspective, we have a new awareness of who we are, what we are, where we're going. We have new tools to deal with all those little challenges that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And we even have new energy for ourselves and hope for the future, for the next moment even. And I'd like to say that if you're still with me, ow, yeah, I gotta get a stand. You know, it's not on my budget just yet. So if you're here with me, and I'm gonna read this verbatim too, because I really like how myself and ChatGPT, I asked them to help me with this because I really want to reach you and get you to understand that being frozen sometimes or stuck in survival most days, that my putting this out there to the world, I'm hoping that it helps you feel like that little spark, that light, that love energy that helps us take the next step in healing. And maybe together we become lighthouses for other people who are experiencing the same frozen, that same functional freeze. Not because we have all the answers, I certainly don't, but because we're willing to honestly show what healing looks like while we're living it. Maybe together we can help each other awaken to new possibilities and help guide not only our own souls, but others safely towards the shorelines and to safety and to life and to love. And that's all this is about. It's not about me wanting to be, I want to be seen, I suppose, because I want to help others. I'm not quite sure where I felt compelled to help others. I think I've always been that way. I'm not one to just sit back and let things happen, or at least before all this happened. I've been very isolated since October 30th, 2022. Very rarely do I go out to events. I think the biggest thing I did was last fall. I went to go see Foreigner at the Big E in West Springfield. That was huge for me. I sat down at a picnic table with people I didn't know. And you know, that's really funny, is that I can talk to people and be very jovial and happy. And I enjoy having conversation with people. But the minute you go in and you try to talk to me about feelings, or if you present me with a problem that I suppose makes my nervous system light up, like the boards in a nuclear plant, if it's starting to melt down, But I didn't feel that day. I enjoyed myself. I was singing at the top of my lungs. And I know there's people out there who say that it's a cover band. I don't care. It's Foreigner. And I'm going to miss Kelly, but I can't think of his name right now. I'm so sorry. Lewis. I think it's Lewis. And I keep wanting to say that he's someone else, and it's the wrong name. So I'm not even going to try to say his last name. But they're living their best selves. Can you see that? How they get through life is how they get through life. And they've managed to get it to the point where they can go out and they can sing and they can play that music. Anyone in any band, I envy you being able to be seen like that. There's a cost to it, of course, because then you become famous and then you don't really have the ability to just walk down the street without somebody screaming your name. So that's kind of the downfall for that. And this is like totally off topic now, right? But I want to end this on a good note, that I'm smiling now because I can enjoy things. It took me a long time to enjoy music after this man died and my nervous system went kaput. I love music. And at that time, I had Sirius XM in my car, and I could listen to, I forget the station, you know, all that 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s rock music. And, you know, you got to take your wins when you get them. And you got to realize those wins are okay. You deserve all your wins. And I'll leave that there. Let's all be a lighthouse for the people who are having a tough time. You know, I like to think that they're in those awakening waves, and we are those lighthouses that are helping those waves reach those shorelines. We can do it. Together, anything is possible. So, like and subscribe, please. Click that button. Click the other button. Let's have this channel grow. I'm hoping that someday that I can make something out of it, you know, money-wise, but that's not my ultimate goal. I'm hoping that it can reach enough people around the world that we can all be lighthouses for each other. That if we're the lighthouses for the water, we can also be lighthouses for land. And imagine if that goes around the world. We could light up the land, the entire world, together. I'm just one person, but if we all did it together, then the dark would be kept to very, very small shadows and easily wiped out. Because that's the hope someday, that this world will be one of peace and love. And that's all that matters. So love yourself. Give yourself a break. Give yourself compassion. And know that I love you. And I would love if we could become a community of lighthouses and awakening waves. I love you.